excited to have this conversation with you.
Me too. Yeah. Thank you for being open to sharing this. I know this is really personal and everyone has such a different journey because all of our bodies are so different. So I just want to start off with just giving like a really quick intro of myself and also just how I know Grace and just our background, because I know we've both evolved. We were just reflecting. So it's been like almost 4 years now, and we've definitely like journeyed and transitioned, one of them being with our hormones. And I think even like what we're eating and the way we're consuming, which I'm sure will come into this at play. But I have really dove into the idea of hormones, the concept of hormones, how that affects us. And I think it's, we're not even exaggerating when we say like we are kind of our hormones. They literally are such a compass and they navigate so much. But when our hormones are out of balance, or maybe they're being skewed or navigated by something external, then that can affect so many different things on so many different levels, which is why really paying attention to the most natural route and how we can focus on that long-term healing and sustainable solutions is really important. So for me, I not only come from a more conservative culture where, it's not really comfortable for women to even talk about this with their mom, about their like sex life or like how to keep themselves protected or what their options are. And I didn't feel really even much support from just friends around me, because I feel that even talking about your sex life back then, a few years ago, it was not as comfortable, especially when you might be around groups of friends that aren't really your friends. That could be difficult too. And that's something that a lot of young women and men navigate around. And then also when everyone else is, putting themselves through hormonal birth control, it can seem like that's the only option. And then additionally, I'm curious to see like what your thoughts are on this, but I feel like whether it's a significant other or not so significant other, their perspective and their support is really crucial as well. I think that was a big game changer for me, like whether it's being with a partner who's not really supportive of your decisions or really cares about your hormones and just plain out like do whatever it takes to not get pregnant, or someone who really cares and it's like let me like take responsibility as well on my end, and it's not just all on the woman that needs to protect both of them from an unplanned pregnancy. So that's kind of a background of like my uncertainty, my concerns. And I so happened to just get off of it a few years ago because I felt like it wasn't really working for me. I felt kind of obligated, and it turned out being the best. And there were so many things I was struggling with that really like transformed over the years, and that goes along with like diet and exercise optimization. But I feel birth control was huge, and especially whatever stage you're at, but especially if you're 20s or 30s as a woman, like feeling more feminine and stepping into that, that's such a crucial age. And birth control or hormonal birth control especially can really hold you back from feeling like, you're divine feminine and tapping into all of that. So I met Grace actually at when we were working together at a organic vegan supplement company, which was really cool back in San Diego. And we resonated on so much, whether that's like eating, lifestyle, and also sustainability is huge. I know that's a big passion for both of us. So I'm sure we'll get into that as well. But Grace, if you want to just give an intro about yourself and then also dive into just your story with birth control.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Grace, and like Sutra said, I live in San Diego. I have a health and wellness blog that I started during COVID. I've struggled a lot with many different health issues, and I needed an outlet to connect with others and be able to share my story. It's always been a struggle, and I felt like I was alone. And it was a place where I was able to tell people what I was going through and connect with others and hopefully help them out with any struggles they're having. A little background about why I got on birth control in the first place. It was sophomore year of high school, I believe, and I was struggling with very bad hormonal acne. It was primarily mostly in this area, which is reflected with your hormones. And so I went and saw a dermatologist, and they originally put me on some topical medication, but it obviously was coming from the inside, so it needed to be something a little stronger. And the first suggestion they had was getting on birth control. And when they tell you about birth control, it is literally a 5-minute conversation. They don't go into any depth about what the side effects is, what it actually is doing to your body. It's literally like they treat it as if it's a magic pill, and they're like, oh, your periods will be lighter, you won't have cramps, you won't have bloating. And they kind of sold it as like, you take this pill and don't have to worry about anything. There's no side effects. And so, right, I was sophomore year of high school, and I chatted with my mom about it, and she was raised to take it as well, and there was no repercussions either. And so she's like, yeah, go do it. I think it'll help with your acne a lot. And so I decided to get on it. And literally after a week of being on it, I did not feel right. It just felt like there was like this heavy gray cloud over me, and just something, I felt I wasn't in tune with my body anymore. It just wasn't feeling right. And so I ended up scheduling another appointment with my doctor, and I told her, I'm not feeling right. This doesn't feel good for me. And she was like, oh, it's just the type I put you on. Every week the pill changes, so it's hard to keep in frequency with your mood. That's why you're not feeling like yourself. Let's try this one. So I ended up switching 4 different times before I found the birth control that I thought would do well with my body. But it did help my acne, but it was just a Band-Aid on the solution, or Band-Aid on the problem. And it wasn't helping anything else. All the other side effects I was having hindered. And I was very, very moody. And I always felt like something was wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what was causing my mood to change. And I just didn't feel, obviously you don't have your period anymore when you're taking birth control. So I didn't feel connected with myself at all. And it subsides all these different other emotions that you have, like even your like passion with your partner, just that subsides, and you start to feel like, what is wrong with me? Like, why don't I have the passion that other females have? And so that was such a tough decision for me, getting off birth control when I wasn't with a committed partner. Sorry, my dog. Then once I started dating my boyfriend, Cooper, it's okay. I really wanted to be connected more with myself. And I knew all these symptoms I having was because of birth control. And the first step I took was starting to get as much information as I possibly could, because they don't tell you anything when you're first taking the pill. When I started researching and listening to podcasts and reading books, it was literally mind-blowing to me that there's all these side effects that no one talks about. Cooper, sorry. There's all these side effects that no one talks about. And so the more and more I started to read up on it, the more passionate I got about it. And it was just, I wanted to be connected with myself. So like you said, I had to have that conversation with my partner, because I didn't feel comfortable getting off the pill when we started this relationship with me on it. And it was very transparent with each other, like, this is what we're using to try to not get pregnant. And so when I sat him down to talk about it, and I just laid out all the symptoms I'm having and why I want to get off it and the research behind it, and he was 100% so supportive. And he was just so mind blown that we aren't educated about it, especially because he was like, wow, I feel like all the females in the past in my life have always been on it. And it's like, it makes so much sense of all these symptoms you're having. And so I really wanted to make the transition off of it. I knew I've been reliant on this pill for many, many years, so I knew I couldn't just get off of it right away. It was really important to me to prep my body. And so the first step I did, like I said, was getting informed as much as I possibly could. So I started with reading books. The 2 books that I read was Into the Pill, I believe, by Dr. Jolene Brighton, and In the Flow by Alyssa Vide. And there are also so many different podcasts with them on it. And so if you're not that keen on reading, you can also listen to the podcast where they go into a lot of information. And I took so many different notes on all the different symptoms I was having, what that was connected to, and how I can boost my body with what I was feeling. So for instance, I felt like I was very inflamed. Like I felt like I was puffy, my joints were hurting. I just, even like my face was inflamed. I just didn't feel right. So I started taking a turmeric pill to prep my body. And so I feel like I needed omega-3 fatty acids. So I started taking that as well. And so I leaned into what the symptoms I was feeling, and I started prepping my body with that supplement I needed. And the first 30 days before getting off my period, this isn't something that everyone has to do, but I felt like I needed to prep my body as much as I possibly could. I cut out all processed food, grains, alcohol, and sugars because I wanted my body to be only on whole foods. So the transition could go as smooth as possible. And I knew this was going to be a big one for my body. And so 30 days before I did all those things, and I honestly felt so amazing. So I liked doing those things, especially combined with the supplements. And I went off of it about 6 months ago now, I believe, 6 or 7. And it was honestly so smooth. Like I got off of it and I literally just felt this gray cloud just shift over. And I just felt like the colors in the sky were brighter, like everything around me was just like radiant.
Yeah.
And when you're on birth control, you don't even like understand what's going on. Like you're just like, you think it's normal. But then when you get off of it, you're like, wow, like this is why, like this is insane. Like I can't believe I was doing this to my body for many years, and this is like, I always felt like there's something wrong, and now I'm like, oh my God. And for the first time in my life, I have in sync with my cycle. So even before getting on birth control, I never even really had my period in high school. So I got on birth control when I wasn't even really having a period. And so when I got off of it now, for the first time ever, I'm in sync with my cycle. Like I'm in sync with the moon. Like it's insane. Like I just feel so connected, and it's hard to describe it, especially when you've been on birth control for so many years. But it is the most amazing feeling. And even just like being more connected with my partner has like, it shifted our relationship too. And it's just like, I wish I could like just change how the system works with doctors. Like the fact that they don't talk to you about it at all is unbelievable. And even a few of my friends, like one of my friends struggles with really bad cramps, and literally the first thing they said to her is like, let's just get on birth control. Like that is the first thing they go to always. And it's just unbelievable that there's not enough information out there. And I can't imagine if these books weren't created or if the podcasts weren't talked about, because I wouldn't even think to even do research on it. I take so many different supplements and pills, and like I don't dive into research like I probably should. So I'm just thankful for those resources to be out there. And it's hard for women, right? Because especially if you're in a committed relationship or not in a relationship at all, you want to be safe and protected. And everyone, it's their own body.
Birth that thing that kind of gave women more freedom, and this is a big thing that's talked about, like whether it's politically or economically, but especially in the early like 1900s when we were transitioning, whether it was like agriculture with food, but also women actually like getting into the workplace, right? And you can almost call it the feminist movement, but there's a huge difference between femininity and feminism. And there's, feminism is not necessarily like the best direction to go through. And just to give you like a short synopsis, kind of that idea that like women must like, work and have the same output as men, but also have to deal with periods and also have to deal with kids and stuff. And it makes us tap more into our masculine side and then almost like forget about our feminine side, which is also big play of birth control. And just to add on, because there's so many amazing points you have that I want to like kind of touch on, but what birth control is doing, and specifically talking about hormonal birth control, is that it's literally replacing like your natural progesterone and estrogen, which are like the female hormones that are vital for you, and having that great balance with a synthetic version. So I actually read something, because I've just been, getting more into the research, that any bleeding, like, because some people still do bleed on hormonal birth control, but
Yeah.
any bleeding that there is not at all your natural cycle. It's just symptoms of the hormonal birth control. So like, yes, you're not having a period at all, but any bleeding that is happening, don't be fooled to think that's your period, because it's
Right.
not. It is completely a different symptom that your body's having, which is crazy. And hormonal birth control is literally disconnecting your brain from your ovaries, like the communication that it has. And if you think about the female cycle, you're almost like a different woman throughout the month, like when you're around your
Yes.
cycle versus before. And I notice this even with like physical training. Like, I'm a lot more energetic, and like I can lift heavier and do the sprints and the high intensity stuff away from my cycle. Whereas when I'm on my period, it's different. And we have to respect that. If you're
Yes.
eating a certain way, you might want to have more carbs around your period cycle, and then maybe fuel with other things. I want to dive into the diet, because you talked about taking out processed foods, and I think that's huge. I know we both come from like more of a plant-based background. One of the biggest things that I noticed was incorporating more fats, which are super
Yes.
vital for females. So I'm curious, like, what specific changes? Obviously, like, taking out processed foods is going to be huge. And for you guys listening, you know like, birth control is something that's literally altering your body, and processed foods are too. Anything that's processed with processed refined carbs and sugars and different chemicals that you might not be able to pronounce, any package that has more than one ingredient on it, if you're not getting it in its raw form, it has gone through a big process. And it's not just about it being unhealthy or maybe like causing you to gain weight. It's literally altering your biology, which is really dangerous, because that's what hormonal birth control is doing. It's altering your biology. It's not natural. But just to dive in, I'd be curious, like, what specific things did you maybe start eating more of, and how has your transition with your diet been?
Yeah, so I came from primarily, I was vegan for 4 years and I struggled with a lot of gut issues. And so I was seeing a naturopath doctor and she shifted my diet to more of a paleo diet. I wasn't getting all the vitamins and nutrients I needed being vegan. And I know that's different for every single person, but it's just what my body needed. And so um, honestly, once I started transitioning and eating more meat, my body like completely shifted and my craving shifted everything. I just felt more in tune with myself as well there. And so and one of the things when I was vegan, I wasn't having a lot of fats at all. It was like high carbs, low fat. And so I was eating all these different carbs and like not processed carbs either, like potatoes and all this stuff. And I wasn't having any fats, and fats are so vital, especially for females. And so I started incorporating like a lot of avocado and walnuts, and I made walnut butter. But I also come from, I had an unhealthy relationship with restricting food. And so now I don't restrict anything. So I will indulge in some steak, or I will have other fatty meats that I typically wouldn't have had. And I feel like that had just completely shifted my cycle. I feel like that's why I have a cycle now, is because of these fat components that I was restricting myself for my whole like growing up years. And then once I started incorporating those into my body, I think that's what made the transition, like getting my period back. And so now I don't limit or restrict anything, and I do enjoy like a lot of fatty foods, and I don't see any difference in my body. Like, I think we have this mindset, if we eat fatty foods, we're going to get fat. And that's not what it is at all for me personally. And there's a difference between like canola oil, which is like can be fatty, and there's a difference between like avocado and like avocado oil. Like, there's just such a difference. And I feel like we have this misconception, especially for females. We're constantly fearing of becoming fat or having extra meat on our bones, but that's not what it's associated with at all. And I think that's totally what made my transition so easily. But yeah, it's crazy what an impact fat has on our body, especially for females.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I know it's something we haven't gotten to like, one-on-one catch up with, but I resonate with that so much. I was also like pretty much fully vegan for 4 years, and I just kind of accidentally started incorporating animal foods, but um just after a few months I noticed like so many shifts, because at that point
Yes.
I had already been off birth control for almost 2 years,
Wow.
but my period was still irregular. And
Wow.
so like it like, so, and I thought it was overtraining, but then because I exercise a lot and then I'm doing some fasting, but it still wasn't that. In fact, like during the like last year 2020, when we were quarantined for most of it, I reduced my training a bunch, and I really like, I didn't restrict with anything. And still, but then when I incorporated those like animal fats, especially, and just fats in general, that was really good. It made such the difference. In fact, like now my cycle is literally synchronized with the full moon, which I know is something like you resonated about too. So I think that's something like a lot of us can carry guilt with. I know Grace and I, like, we're very passionate about the environment and
Yes.
sustainability. And so that can feel like a lot of guilt, because even if it's not like, the actual animal that you're eating, but just knowing all of the resources that go into it, luckily
Yes.
there are really regenerative approaches to that. And we can totally get into that in a different live. But as far as eating to balance out your hormones, my biggest thing is like, if you're not able to heal yourself, you can't heal the collective. So don't feel like it's selfish
Right.
to do whatever you need to do to heal yourself. And I know, yeah, some of those, like I would say the three big foods for me that really changed things was like incorporating red meat, and then also salmon, which I just love so
Yes.
much. It's so satiating. And then also eggs once in a while. I know for
Yep.
some people dealing with gut stuff, it's not the best. And I'm not doing too many eggs, but that yolk is so important for women who are like worried about collagen or biotin. Like that yolk has
Yes.
so much of that. And we've been taught to not have fat, especially saturated fat, but it's so vital. And it really goes hand in hand with like helping with our gut, our metabolism, and then our hormone regulation and all of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I also want to just dive into a little bit as far as like communication with your partner or significant other
Yes.
and what that would look like. I know for me personally, like I noticed a huge shift, and I really credit my current partner to like so much of this healing, because from the get-go he was super understanding. He was like, no, you shouldn't be taking it. It's literally like messing up with your hormones. And, I'm going to take responsibility and like, be with you along this way, and like being nurturing around like respecting a woman, like while they're on their period. I kind of, I come from that background of where like you're supposed to remain hard. You don't show any like
Yes.
weakness. And I know like, especially on my when I'm on my period, like in the past, like I just never even acknowledged it. I was like, I'm still gonna go to the gym, I'm still gonna train hard, I'm still gonna try to like diet. I don't know like exactly what your background with eating. For me, it was like restricted eating, but then binging, and that was something I dealt with
Yep.
for so long. But those cravings really went away when I started eating better.
Yes.
But with the partner stuff, I remember vividly being in past relationships where either the person just didn't know anything about it, so they were
Yep.
like, okay, this is what you're going to do. Or like I've had those conversations where I'm like, hey, like, can we actually talk about our options? Because like, why should I be the only person like actually doing something
Right.
about this just because you don't want to use a different form of protection or take part in
Yep.
this? And I didn't get the best response from it. And I feel like a lot of women, which myself I did too, like just completely shake it off, because like it's
Yes.
normalized, like that's just what a woman does. And I think this, like, for any men tuning in, or girlfriends having a conversation with their boyfriends, or just anybody, for men this is really important, because if the hormones of your lady it's going to affect their pheromones, basically how they're
Yeah.
attracted to you. You might even be attracted to someone who is not the right fit for you, which now reflecting back, I'm like, whoa, I feel like that was true. And which is so crazy. And also, it's going to like this is one of the biggest symptoms, is like, it's going to affect the woman's sex drive. So like the whole point of taking this is to have sex, basically. But like, if it's affecting your sex drive, then like, that's horrible. And for a woman, especially if they're dealing with those symptoms and then no sex drive, they're going to feel like detached from their femininity and then feel insecure. And then that's just like a recipe for a disaster. Cause like most women, unless they feel fully, you know, secure and relaxed and feel good about themselves, it's going to be hard to be vulnerable and, you know, actually do the deed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, if you can dive a little bit deeper, or any advice you have for people like with their, you know, partners. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it was something I don't know, for some reason, when I thought about bringing up the conversation with my partner in the very beginning, before we like really, really got to know each other, I'm like, is he gonna want to be with someone that's on birth control? Like, is that going to be a hindering fact of why he's with me or not? Because he wants someone that's on birth control because he started this relationship with me when I was on it. But he is like the sweetest and kindest man. And he was raised super close with his mother. And so he has that like understanding to like the female body, and just like very understanding of my emotions. And I've always struggled with health issues, and he's been a part of it and just like has really been my support and partner throughout it all. So when I started having all these different symptoms from birth control and really starting to fine tune what was causing what, I had that conversation with him, and I just laid out what I was feeling and what the side effects of birth control was. And he was 100% supportive. And he was like, do what you need to do to feel your absolute best, like no matter what that is. Like, and he was like, it's not going to change our relationship at all. Like, we are going to do what we need to do. And he was like, and we just like talked about what the next steps were. And as far as our relationship, like what form of protection we were going to use and how that was going to work. But I think this is just what I personally think, and I hope it doesn't offend anyone, but if you're with someone that isn't supportive of being with your highest self and really connecting with your body and doing what's best for yourself, maybe that isn't the right person for you. Because if the roles were reversed and males had the symptoms we had and had to go through having periods and the cramps and all these different things, they wouldn't last one day on birth control of all these different symptoms you have. But so if he isn't able to put himself in your shoes and understand what you're feeling, then maybe that isn't the best partner for you, because you should have someone that wants to help you be the best version of yourself. And the transition was a little bit difficult for myself, because personally, when we were on birth control, we didn't have to worry about a thing. You know, it's like, I felt completely safe on it. I've been on it for many, many years, and I didn't have any scares, and it's very effective. And so once I stopped using birth control, it was a little bit of a transition. But like I said, it just made our relationship so much stronger, because what you were touching on, when you're on birth control, it's synthetic. And so you don't have that sex drive that you typically would. And even chatting with my friends about it that are in serious relationships. And one of my friends recently got off of it. And when she was on it, she's like, why don't I have this like passion towards him? Like, why don't I want to hop in bed and like make love to him? And then when she got off of it, she was like, oh my God, like I just feel the sensations in myself.
Yeah.
Like I want to pursue him. Like I totally get it now. And so even though like getting off of it was like the best thing for us, I think, like we are so connected now and like so in touch with each other. And now like when I am feeling a certain way, like I do have a little bit of PMS, like I feel my mood changes, and now he like completely understands, like, all right, like if I want to be quiet for a few days, and like he's like so in tune with that, and like he understands my body better, I feel like. And the conversation can be super difficult, but I personally think it's the best thing you can do. And what I always try to remind myself is that I'm eventually going to have to get off of it. I'm not going to be on it for the rest of my life. I want to be a mother one day. So why not rip the band-aid off now and feel better for longer than waiting until I want to have kids and then try to make the transition. Either way, I was going to have to do it. And my body was giving me all the signals that I shouldn't be on it anymore. So I knew the time was right, but I completely understand where that can be hard in the conversation, even if you aren't in a relationship and you like to have that as like a protection if you don't want to like worry about anything. But I just can't encourage it enough. Like even just trying to take the leap and just seeing how you feel. I know everyone's body is so different, but I can't stress enough like prepping your body too for getting off of it. I think if I would have just stopped taking it, it would have been a or downward spiral, and then I would have went back on it because I'm like, wait, this is awful. This transition's not easy. I'm gonna get back on it because maybe I did feel fine on it. But really prepping your body, having that conversation with your partner before, learning as much information as you possibly can, has really like, there was no looking back once I got off it. It's like, okay, I did all the hard steps. I know all the information. There's no going back now. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think that's so key. We got a question, and I actually want to touch on this because it's super important, because whether it is anything from acne to an irregular period, or if it's even like endometriosis or PCOS, right, like people are getting prescribed birth control. And there's actually like facts that show like doctors actually admit to saying that when they're faced with these different different symptoms or different things that women are experiencing, they're literally trained to prescribe birth control, which means they're not trained to go to the root cause. So it's not their fault. That's like just their training. So that's a whole different subject as far as like re-questioning how medical works. In fact, just like a little anecdote, I once had a really horrible experience at the doctor, which is one of the reasons like I've been kind of scared to go. And I also want to clarify, like regular doctor, very different from a naturopathic doctor or a functional medicine doctor that's looking at the whole view. But that, as far as, I just had some really weird numbness going on in my breasts actually. So I was kind of scared and I was like, what's going on? So I just went in and it eventually went away. I think it ended up just because it was like winter and it was super cold and I was just like really sensitive, but like it was kind of weird. But I went in and my normal doctor wasn't there. So I go in and it's a male doctor, and that was already really uncomfortable, but it was more like immediate. Like I just wanted to get it done right away because it was freaking me out. And so he did an examination, but then he asked me after and he was like, so, are you on birth control? Like he was asking me these different questions. And, he then goes to say like, his wife and him had just had a baby and they're like doing all this work to have a baby. And he asks me, and I was like 19 at the time. And he is like, so are you trying to have a baby anytime soon? And I'm like, no. And he's like, so I would really recommend to just not be sexually active. There's no reason you need to be doing this. And I was like, whoa, like I'm already feeling so scared to be going into the doctors to open up about this, let alone with a male doctor. And then I was like, wow, these people are really not primed to support you in any way and to even give you any other options. And obviously just not having sex is not a solution, because whether it's looked down upon or not, the fact of the matter is, primarily speaking, we are just automatically drawn to food and sex. Those are literally survival instincts. So whether you want to have a kid or not, we're on this earth to procreate, basically. So in that sense, it means just our natural instincts. That's why sex sells, right? Like we're just naturally going to gravitate towards those things. But kind of going back to, getting off birth control and then also transitioning, but also, like how to navigate the entire scenario. I think it's really important to like you said, not to offend anyone, but be really open and honest with your partner and like decide like how you want to go about that, you know? And I was going back to one other point. I totally had a brain. What was I saying? It'll come. But okay, so I would say touching on a few last points. Oh, you know what it was? I was answering the question, but I kind of wanted to go on a tangent on that. As far as like why birth control is even prescribed. So big one is regulating period. So just right off the bat, knowing that birth control is replacing your actual estrogen and progesterone hormones with synthetic hormones,
Yeah.
like using common sense, it really doesn't make sense to regulate your period by putting basically synthetic or fake hormones in. So this is not, you know, the person asking, it's not your fault, or even, I mean, it's kind of the doctor's fault, but not their fault because they're trained to do that. It's really our responsibility. And this is where the awareness and like you coming on here, Grace, and sharing your story is so important, because we need to actually empower ourselves, because the natural route is actually not the popular route, and it's been really normalized to take birth control. So when regulating your period, I mean, Grace and I both shared like diet was a huge, huge factor. And I would say diet is probably like one of the biggest factors to most things. So if you are currently having an irregular period, and feel free to DM either one of us with like specific questions on diet, but any type of processed foods, just to reiterate again, this is already going to be altering your biology. On top of that, if you're not getting your sufficient fats and proteins, especially, then you're also depriving your body of essential nutrients, especially as a woman. So really reevaluating this, and this can be different for people, but like for most people, I found that higher fatty meats and animal fat foods are really a game changer. I think ancestrally, this is what really created a shift for me from, you know, going from being fully vegan to now incorporating animal foods. That was a huge shift. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that as far as like regulating period in general, and what other stuff. I know you placed a huge focus, Grace, on gut health, and I think that's like basically your second brain. So if you want to just share a little bit as far as like how that's connected with our hormones and just even period regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing I want to touch on that I do to regulate my period that I wasn't really sure about in the beginning, but once I started doing it, I think it made a huge impact with seed cycling. And so what you do is you're in different phases of your cycle. So day 1 through 14, you're taking a different combination of seeds, and then 14 through 28, it's a different combination of seeds. But you just grind up flax seeds and pumpkin seeds and then sesame seeds, and you just literally add them on top of everything, and it helps regulate your period. I think that made a huge difference for me as well. I just grind it up at the beginning of the week, keep the seeds in my fridge, and then throw them on top of whatever, top of salads, smoothies, anything. I just throw them on top of. But like you said, the gut is your second brain. There's such a connection there, and it's honestly something I'm still working on. I do still struggle with hormonal acne. So after getting off birth control, it was completely fine. And then between month 4 and 6 is when your acne really starts to come back. And so about month 5, my acne completely inflamed in this area. And I think it has a lot to do with first me balancing my hormones a little more and with my gut health. I do struggle with SIBO, which is small intestine bacteria overgrowth, and it's been something I've been working on for many years now. And so I believe once I have that figured out, my acne will start to go away. But I am seeing an esthetician in San Diego called the Complexion Club, and she is very informed in acne. So just seeing her for a few months, my acne has already gotten so much better. But there is a huge connection there between gut health and your period health, and balancing your hormones in general. Like you said, with your gut being your second brain, when something is off there, it's also going to trigger your hormones being imbalanced. And I do take supplements to try to regulate that, but it isn't something I've completely perfected yet, to be honest.
Yeah, no, thank you for your transparency with that. I think it's something that's ever evolving, and we can say like we found the fix, but then we can go through a different cycle of life or move somewhere where the climate's different and so many
Right.
things can change with that. I think so, like, just to share as far as acne, because I know that's huge for people. And for me, I had a lot of that in like middle school and high school. And at that time, I like begged my mom and I was like, can we please see the dermatologist? Like, can I get something? And I ended up being prescribed. I don't know what the name of it is. It wasn't birth control, thank goodness. And I don't even think my mom would like let me because she's very anti. And I appreciate her for that. But that did help. But it still kept coming on and off. And as I've been navigating my diet, like I still felt that even though I had more of like a brighter complexion eating plant-based, it was still not a cure for acne. And I also thought that just normalized like acne or pimples that come up like around your period cycle was normal. And this is totally just my own experience, but I just want to share in case you're curious or anyone tuning in.
Yes.
But if you're familiar with the ultimate elimination diet, it is kind of like going fully animal based, because then you're kind of taking out anything that is like might cause some inflammation or imbalance with yourself.
Wow.
So I'm really big on like paleo. I even when I was vegan, I wasn't really big on grains and beans. I kind of just had them because I felt like I
Yeah.
had to get my nutrients from something. But after diving into more animal based, I really took out even kind of like the normal like plants that I depended on so much, like highly fibrous and actually more talk on the toxic side, kind of like broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, whereas like things like cucumbers and zucchini would be on the low toxicity scale, even for
Wow.
your gut to really like, take in. And so I've been doing more animal based for people who don't know, basically like eating primarily animal foods. And you can think of it as paleo, but also more primal for a few months now. And ever since I started, it wasn't even doing the full elimination, but I haven't even broke out once, even close to my period. I've never like
Wow.
thought it was possible to have such like literally like non breakout skin. And I'm in like humid weather. I sweat all the time. My skin used to be more like on the oily side and then sometimes get too dry, especially in California. And I feel like it's balanced. And I barely use any skin product. Like I literally use a random like I know I should probably invest in better quality skincare products. And I just share this because like that skincare industry, whether it's makeup or skincare, is so huge. Like there's
Yes.
products that are like so expensive and I've spent so much money on all of this stuff. So I just want to share that like diet and your gut microbiome and your hormones are huge. So just as far as like you feeling like a woman, that can be big. And just like you said, there's going to be a transitionary period. And for a lot of people, they go through that period of like breaking out a bunch after getting off
Yes.
birth control. And it's something to be at peace with. The other symptom, which I think I personally experienced, was hair loss. It looks like I have a lot of hair, but it's definitely a lot thinner than it was like years ago. And so that kind of sucks, but I definitely think incorporating more higher fats is helping with a lot of like regrowth. Like I've been seeing a lot more baby hairs and stuff come up. Um, but yeah, I think that's huge. And I just wanted to share that because for anyone who wants to kind of try something else out, even if it's for like 2 weeks to a month, I think it'll make the biggest difference to try more of an elimination paleo primal style way of eating, to really like take it back a notch, because any kind of grains, gluten especially, but then also toxic vegetables and fruits can cause a lot of disruption and inflammation, especially if there's like bacteria overgrowth in the intestine, like you
Yeah.
mentioned. But yeah, that's I really appreciate like all of that you've been sharing. I would say like I'd love to wrap up with just any like last tips, and then if anyone has any other questions, actually I see one on here. saying, like asking if supplements are bad. So this is a really interesting point, and I'm curious to see what you would say about this too, Grace, because actually the way I met Grace was at a supplement company. And at that time, I was really big into fitness. And I also feel like I just didn't really do my research. I did my research to an extent, but I didn't go to deeper root cause because we're just not trained to question things like that. We're trained to be like, turmeric's good for inflammation, so take turmeric, and you need this many grams of protein, so take protein powder. It's not like, why? Because supplements didn't exist for our ancestors. So one of the reasons I got more into like animal-based eating is because I wanted to see if I could actually live a lifestyle without having to supplement. For me personally, like to maintain the vegan lifestyle I wanted to, I had to have things like nutritional yeast, which is like totally fake. It doesn't make sense. And then like, you know, a bunch of protein powder. And then also being in the fitness industry where you have BCAAs and you have stuff like pre-workout, like these are all things that really normalized this, like supplements for me, just like birth control was normalized. And so totally not against supplements. In fact, like I go on and off taking magnesium currently. And then also I think zinc is really good. And then basically anything around electrolytes. And I think that has a lot of education that we get, like even having more bone broth or bone marrow, that can be really amazing for collagen and calcium when it's difficult to get it from, you know, a lot of different plant foods that maybe we can't digest or might cause inflammation, or even animal foods, like if that's something that someone is open to. But with supplements, totally not against it. I just believe truly that however we can get the most natural way possible is important. Like even vitamin D is huge. We definitely need vitamin D, but funny enough, like red meat actually has a bunch of vitamin D, which no one told me about, like that these foods that were like kind of demonized have the most amount of nutrients. And then obviously the sun. But if you literally can't have any meat and if you can't go out in the sun because of your job, then yeah, take a vitamin D supplement. So that's where I am with supplements. I'm curious for you, like what you're currently taking, because I know for you transitioning, you actually prepped your body with supplements, and that is like a really great way to use them as a supplementation rather than, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. I always think less is more, especially like when you start getting in this supplement world, it's so many different capsules. And I think that irritates my gut lining, just so many different things. And so I try to keep it minimal as possible. One thing I swear by is magnesium. I take that before bed, and I think it totally helps me sleep better. It shifts my mood, and that's something I swear by. I also struggle a lot with gut issues, so I do have to take digestive enzymes before I eat, which helps me break down my food better. And I do have to take something to help me go to the bathroom, a Motoprol, because it's also something I struggle with gut wise. So, but when I started this gut healing journey, I was on like 20 different types of supplements from the doctor. And one thing that the doctor was clear about was like, this is just herbal supplements to supplement your body to get through this transition phase. And so I was trying to clear out all the different bacteria and pesticides in my stomach. And so now it's much less, and I'm just trying to help aid my body the things that they struggle with. But I think we can be drowned so much with all these different supplements. There's always a new hip one coming out that everyone claims you need, or there's a bunch of Instagram ads. But I think just being so in tune with your body and seeing, like, personally, I get really stressed, and so I have a hard time sleeping. So magnesium does help me. And I think you have to test in your own body and see what works and doesn't work. What works for someone else isn't going to work with you. You just have to be in tune with what you need. So I only think it's necessary if you absolutely need it. Like you're saying, vitamin D is super important for immunity. And a lot of us spend it inside at work and don't get much time outside, and that can be super vital. But I didn't even know you could get it from red meat, so that's super interesting. And that is something I used to take vitamin D, but now I go on daily walks every single morning to try to be in the circadian rhythm. And so I don't take vitamin D anymore, but that was something I was taking when I was spending a lot of times indoors, and especially in winter when it's colder out and I have a harder time getting outside because I'm a baby. I'll probably start to take it then, but I only take it when it's absolutely necessary, and I think it's fixing or helping with an issue I'm having, like for instance, being stressed or sleeping.
Yeah. And I think there's a question that's probably for you too. What's the supplement to help your bowels go?
So it's called Motorporol. It's by Pure, I think is the name. I can send you a screenshot of the picture, but or send you a screenshot of the supplement. But there's also magnesium. There's over the counter called Calm. That is supposed to help you go to the restroom as well. And so it's a little powder supplement that you can put in your drink. But if you're a regular and going to the bathroom every day, it's not something you need. It's just my gut is a little messed up, so it's something that needs a little bit of an aid. And something else that I take when I travel, because for some reason when I travel, my gut just really gets messed up. It gets out of its normal routine. It's called MAG07, MAG07. And it's not something you want to be relying on every single night, but you can take a few and then you will for 100% go to the bathroom the next day. It's kind of like an all natural laxative. But it is something I'm actively working on getting off of. I wouldn't recommend it unless you absolutely need it. You don't want your body to be dependent on it like mine currently is. But yeah, I can send you the screenshot of the supplement I do take for it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Grace. And two things to add to that. I think one of them I wanted to bring up, and I'm curious your thought on this, but as far as like if you wanted to go more a natural route, I used to be super scared of fruit. But fruit, if you can like literally replace like even all of any kind of carbs you have with just fruit, so you don't have to be like scared of like, you know, carbs and sugars. Fruit is amazing and it has the most natural digestive enzymes. The fruits that tend to be like sweeter are actually the ones that are best for us with the most vitamins and also help with that. So pineapple can be really intense for people, but something like papaya is amazing. Like I
Yeah.
love papaya. Obviously try to go seasonally. And if you can get it from the farmer's market, mango is great. Be really careful with having those around other food. I would really like have that maybe first thing in the morning and then wait because you're not wanting to mix fruit with other foods. But a lot of fruits like that. So again, doing your research to find what works for you and also enjoy the process and have the foods like most likely if your body's telling you you love it and you want it, then you should. But if it's a
Yeah.
processed food, that's a false addiction. So don't follow that cue. And then finally, I was going to say coffee is huge. Coffee can be really inflammatory and mess with hormones actually.
Right.
Like it can be especially around your period, it's not something you'd want to have. I know so many people have it as just like their ritual, so it's kind of hard to wean off of that. But that's just a big suggestion. Are you a coffee drinker at all?
So I used to be, I was very, very addicted to it. And like you said, the ritual, I loved getting up and having a morning cup of coffee. But with all my gut issues, my doctor, my naturopath suggested I get off of it. And the transition phase was hard. I had a really bad headache for like a week or two, but then afterwards, I felt so good. And I do have a matcha. I don't have it every single day now. I try to limit because I don't want to be addicted to anything or dependent on anything. So now I have a matcha occasionally here or there, but with coffee, it just spiked my adrenals and I would just have all this energy and then I would crash. With matcha, it's more sustained. And I think it played a huge role in my hormones as well and just getting in sync with my cycle too. I was always so dependent on coffee and now I can't even like just the acidity in my stomach. Even if I have a few sips, it starts to hurt my stomach. So it's crazy what a difference even coffee makes. And like you said, most of us, it is a part of our morning ritual. Most people have multiple cups a day and don't think twice about it. And it is very inflammatory.
Yeah, coffee is one of those things where like for me, I love working at coffee shops because I work from home a lot, but like it's hard to go to a coffee shop and not order coffee. And
Yeah.
most like chai lattes or matcha lattes are sweetened artificially. So that's like really hard. It's a big struggle.
Yes.
But definitely like navigating your way around it, or just trying to do it like just if you're going to a coffee shop and maybe not at home, like not keeping it at home. Coffee is actually like on the highest end of the toxicity scale. And a lot of coffees, especially if they're not organic, can like be contaminated with mold. So many things like coffee. I'm just addressing it because majority of people have coffee, but it's a game changer. I've been doing no coffee. And if you are doing coffee, bulletproof coffee can be great, especially if you're a woman, to get your fats in. So that's like adding like ghee or butter or even coconut MCT oil in your coffee. And if you froth it up, it makes it really nice and creamy. But also like doing something like bone broth can be super healing.
Yes.
So just play around with it. But I definitely think, like you said, like not being dependent on something, because that can really hold you back. And coffee culture has really normalized coffee being okay when it's not like the best for most people, especially if you're dealing with like anxiousness or stress.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So thank you so much, Grace. Do you have any like last things you want to say?
No, but if anyone is thinking about getting off birth control, has any questions about the transition or anything at all, you can always DM me or reach out. I also have a few resources on my blog, which is www.graceann.co. But if there's anything I can do to help you make the transition, or if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you guys haven't checked out Grace, please do, because she has, yes, amazing resources and just super authentic how she shares her stories, and really like amazing recipes and different stuff too. So
Thank you.
thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined in. Feel free to ask us any questions, and we'll be back soon with more stuff. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.